Here we go, Not the Top 20 podcast, grading every League One team's season out of 10 as a way of drawing the curtain down on the 25-26 season. This sponsored by Sky Bet and the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund. We're going to go through League One in alphabetical order and give each team a mark out of 10. First up, AFC Wimbledon, 8 out of 10. Now, I'd like to bring up the concept of an underrated overachiever. George, this is a phrase that you coined a few months ago. In each division, there are some very obvious overachievers, and we spend most of the season celebrating them. So what's an underrated overachiever?
Just a club who've done really well this season, but in an area of the table where people don't necessarily give them the credit that they deserve. Teams get credit for avoiding relegation, but that means that at one point they were threatened with relegation. They get credit for getting promoted or getting in the top six, achievements. But an achievement can also be avoiding relegation, avoiding being in the conversation for relegation, or just overperforming your budget in a way that's not spectacular, but is still effective. That is an underrated overachiever.
It's an 8 out of 10 season for Wimbledon. People will remember that it got a little nervy towards the end of things. But to go back to what you just said, there is an overperformance of budget angle that has to be accepted and acknowledged. And Wimbledon and Exeter, in particular, in League One, they have budgets that are dwarfed by those around them. Wimbledon, from what I know of League One budgets this season, the average budget, so the 12th and 13th teams in League One, had double the budget of Wimbledon. They were fighting up against it in a big, big way, and they stayed up. They had 2 really good spells during the season, and they had 2 quite bad spells during the season. But overall, they got over 50 points in their first season back at this level, up against it in many ways, and had to wave goodbye to their fan-owned bedfellows, Exeter City, which was a reflection of how difficult it is. An 8 out of 10 season for Wimbledon, I reckon. Who's up next for you?
Barnsley, next up for me, who I've got 4 on a 4. They got a 4 points out of 10.
A 4. Mm-hmm.
A 4. 4. So they had a funny thing this season where, because they had so many games in hand, basically until about 4 games to go, there was this whole thing where, like, if they win all their games in hand, they could get in the top 6. But if they lose all their games in hand, they could get relegated. So we never really knew where Barnsley kind of stood. And then it turned out they didn't win all of them. They didn't lose all of them, and then they ended up basically right in the middle of the table in 15th, so lower mid-table. But on 59
I'd love
points.
to introduce you and our audience to the benefits of the points per game metric. Can really help in instances like this.
But what I mean here is that there was an assumption from some that they might be good enough to win those games. I know what you're saying, but it wasn't enough. But they ended up on 59 points. They were 7 points clear of the relegation zone, and many more points, 16 points shy of the playoffs. It was a disappointing campaign. It resulted in Conor Harrahan kind of agreeing to leave his role as manager of the football club early, which was announced early, which is never a great sign. They lost Davis Keillor-Dunn in January and replaced him with Tom Bradshaw, which isn't a great position to be in. Dave McGoldrick's goals were incredibly important to ensure that the season couldn't have been worse than that. But for a club that that tend to be knocking on the door at the top end of the league, this was a real step backwards and a 4 out of 10.
Paul, 3 out of 10 that looked like it might be a 1 out of 10 until the last month of the season. They finished 13th in the end, Blackpool, winning 7 of their last 9 games, having won 10 of their first 37. So if it was a 1 out of 10 for the first 3 quarters of the season, maybe it finishes as a 9 out of 10. I think that lands at about a 3 out of 10 overall. It's a drop from 9th to 13th from the season before, 7 fewer points as well, despite what was widely agreed to have been an ambitious summer, an expensive summer as well, and one in which they actually took a massive step backwards, which isn't meant to happen when you spend a lot of money in the transfer window. An unacceptable season for the standards that they should be looking to hit. Pretty messy in lots of ways from the very beginning. Steve Bruce's start to the season was terrible, and Ian Evatt tried very, very hard and eventually did manage to turn things round. But for a long time, the team on the pitch was tough to watch, pretty unserious, pretty flimsy, pretty unreliable. Plenty of injuries derailed things, and things got pretty scary after a defeat at Wimbledon in particular. But they made it into 13th in the end, so maybe I'm being a bit overdramatic, but complete non-entity away from home for most of the season. Just not a team that should have been as bad as they were for as long as they were. 3 out of 10 for Blackpool.
Bolton Wanderers get 9. Can't give them a 10 just because they have the financial support and the quality and everything else that they could have finished in the top 2 places. And I think had they not won the playoff final, there would have been disappointment amongst Bolton fans that they hadn't got promoted this season. Having said that, they were excellent throughout the campaign. A bit of a slow start with a lot of draws, but they put that right. By the time they really got going, though, it was too late to really mount a challenge on the top 2. Brilliant over 2 legs against Bradford, winning both games 1-0. And then an incredible display at Wembley. Maybe the most dominant playoff final, certainly playoff final half that we've seen. And that was 2 years after being dominated themselves by Oxford in that exact game. Scoring 4 goals in the playoff final was incredible. Scoring 3 of them in front of your fans, amazing. Stephen Schumacher deserves a lot of credit. A lot of the players had really good seasons. Amari Cozier-Dubry being one of those. But just a really fun team, a good team, a promoted team, deserving playoff final winners. A magnificent season. 9 out of 10 for Bolton.
Yeah, and for the team they beat in the playoff semi-finals, Bradford City, 9 out of 10 season. Could not realistically have asked for any more from any of the individuals or the collective unit. Obviously, it's a 10 out of 10 if they win the playoffs and win back-to-back promotions, but they didn't. Still, an incredible finish, having just been promoted from League Two. You might pick at the fact that the January signings were quite abundant and not very effective. But wow, what an unbelievable effort from all involved. A team far better than the sum of its parts. A manager doing brilliantly, orchestrating all aspects of the club from what I can see. Fans engaged, out in force, creating an amazing atmosphere and helping the team with an amazing home record. And most easily and simply, their highest league finish, having been relegated from the Championship in 2003, 2004. Bradford are back, and the way they've done it's been amazing. 9 out of 10 for them. Yeah,
I've struggled with Burton. I'm going to give them 5 out of 10. I had 6 down, but I think it is a 5. And I think for Burton fans, that's because as a fan base, as a club, they've got to break out of this cycle of kind of just staying up as being good enough. We know that Burton under the Nordic Football Group have spent more money than they did previously, and it hasn't really yielded to any on-pitch improvement. They are still a team that battle relegation. Credit to Gary Bowyer for saving them. Credit to Gary Bowyer for saving them last season too. But at some point, they've got to take a step forward and stop being a team that are embroiled in this mess down towards the bottom end.
Would you not say budgetary-wise, this is pretty much their ceiling, staying up in League One?
I would like to know. I don't think it was the season before last when they signed 27 players, or whatever it was that summer. They've still got a lot of players. Tari Shea being one, Jake Beasley being another, Charlie Webster being another, and they've got quite a lot of players who I think would get into most teams in League One at League One level. And certainly, I think Shade and Webster, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they are playing at the top end of League One by at least some point in the next year or so. Also, I was kind of looking at the league table being like, yeah, they finished 17th. Wow. And then you look at it and you're like, well, there's only 2 points clear of 20th. And this is where I don't think we can get too bogged down in the detail as the league finishes. If the points gap between 4 or 5 teams is only 2 points, because that's just, it's not a big enough impact over the course of a season. So, average, no worse than average because they didn't go down, no better than average because it wasn't really a season where they kicked on.
Cardiff City, 9 out of 10. For reasons that we went over in depth in our Cardiff City promotion special, an excellent season for them, and played some brilliant football. Brian Barry Murphy, in many ways, has kind of reignited the club. And I think the passion of a lot of the fans has been dialed up this season, seeing a lot of talented young players playing good football, lots of things that they hadn't seen for a long time as they sort of dribbled their way down the Championship and into League One. So a really, really good, a great performance from all involved, a 9 out of 10 season, because once they lost to Lincoln, they were clearly the second best team in the league rather than the best team in the league.
We have Doncaster Rovers now, who I've got as a 7. At the beginning, it looked like it could be an 8 or a 9. At one point, it looked like it could be a 5 or even a 4 when they were embroiled in a relegation battle. But they've ended up finishing mid-table, and I'm going to give them, a slightly higher mark than Burton and Albion for a couple of reasons. You know, they may have only finished 3 points ahead of them, but they finished on 60 points, so 6 points clear of Burton. And they're also a newly promoted side, and I think a first season consolidation and a mid-table finish, even though they didn't deliver on early season form, has got to be a good thing. The one alarming thing to say is they did finish with a goal difference of minus 19, which it really threw me. When you consider they only finished 3 points behind Wycombe, and Wycombe finished the season on a goal difference of plus 11. So that's a 30-goal swing between the two clubs, and yet only 3 points between them. I don't really understand how that can even be a thing. But it just shows that when Donny were bad, they were getting well beaten consistently.
I'll tell you how it's a thing. And I did have to check this, but it was my first instinct. Biggest underperformance per XG in front of goal in the whole league, 16 goals under their expected goals number. And I wouldn't be surprised if I look on the defensive end, whether it might be similar. Biggest underperformance defensively in the whole league. The biggest underperformance on both ends of the pitch. So the worst shot-stopping performance, if you like, and the worst finishing performance in the whole league. A 30-goal swing to what it could have been had they hit their XG numbers.
Right.
So
there you go. Time to get some strikers. But they got Billy Sharp. He doesn't miss.
Exeter, 4 out of 10. They got relegated. They still overperformed their budget by 2 places. And that will annoy some people that I've even bothered to say it, because if you get relegated, why does it matter? But I think we definitely want to try and reflect that in some ways, a team's budget dictates broadly what your expectations should be. And for Exeter, they clearly have a bottom 2 budget, and they finished 4th from bottom. So the emotional aspect of relegation means you can't, in good faith, call it a 5 out of 10, an average season, a par season. But the unemotional guy within me kind of wants to kind of go to bat for them. Not only do they have a low budget, but they also lost their excellent manager, who got poached by a team that was beneath him in the table at the time because they're seemingly a bigger pull. So plenty that they're up against here. The tumble from that point was not good, obviously, and it went from probably a 7 out of 10 season to a 4 out of 10 season and a relegation for Exeter City. Huddersfield
Town now, I'll give them a 4. Another season that promised so much. Another season where promotion was the aim, where they were, the club, and you look at the team and the players, a lot of really well established top end League One players, even a few pretty established Championship players, and yet again it fell short. Lee Grant was appointed early in the season, had a decent start, but the form dipped off pretty alarmingly. Liam Manning was then brought in, and for various reasons that appointment didn't work. Obviously, from a footballing perspective, initially didn't work particularly well, and then Liam's obviously going through a tough time at the moment at home, and he had to take a step away. So just no targets really hit, nothing really to redeem, apart from the fact that obviously they, given the quality of that they possess, and some good early season form, it didn't get any worse than missing out on the playoffs, but. This is a club that should really be in the top 6, and they never really looked like they were going to get into it. So a 4 out of 10 for Huddersfield.
I think Leyton Orient is a 3 out of 10. I could make a case for a 2 out of 10. They lost in the playoff final, and then they almost got relegated, and they got 26 points fewer than they did the season before. Now, it's hard to kind of work out what to tie together between the 2 seasons, because we knew that they had lost their whole team. We knew that the majority of that playoff final team were loanees and Ethan Galbraith. And so it wasn't... with hindsight, it's not that surprising that if you lose most of a really, really good team with really, really talented players for the level who you didn't own and you only had because you were borrowing them from clubs higher up, which in itself doesn't have a particularly guaranteed hit rate, the loan market, then if you don't get it right over the summer, you're going to probably tumble. But I don't think anyone expected a tumble like this with Richie Wellens in charge. I think he described it as a complete wasted season. So I don't see how it could be any more than a 3, and a 2 might be more appropriate. But the goals of Don Ballard, there were some games where Orient played quite well and did not look like the kind of the relegation candidate that they did, that they were for most of the season in the end. So it's still kind of hard to get your head around them being this this poor. Hopefully for them, a good summer, and it'll just be a blip. But yeah, 3 out of 10 I'll go with. We'd love to hear from you in the comments, by the way, if you agree or vehemently disagree. That's fine too. Let's keep it respectful and let's enjoy talking about football together and reminiscing on the 25-26 season. Yeah, let us know in the comments. And if you're on Spotify, if you could give us a 5-star rating, that'd be amazing. If you're on YouTube, just hit subscribe. That'd be amazing as well.
We're doing sum up, or are we doing...
Let's do one more from you and then sum up.
It's 10 time. Time for a 10. The
Yes.
Lincoln City. How could it be anything
English
else?
brilliance.
How could it be anything else? This team finished top of the league on 103 points, finishing the season with 29 consecutive games unbeaten, breaking the League One unbeaten record. And let's hope they never get an opportunity to extend it. Let's hope they stay in the second tier or even above forever.
Yes, this will be their lowest league finish forever.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And it's a 10 out of 10. Michael Skabada's done, I think the accolades, and actually not just Skabada, but the staff around him, the very smart people who run Lincoln City Football Club. It just feels like a club that has been well run for a long time, and they're now reaping the rewards on the pitch. Various different players at different times during the season stepping up, but Jack Moylan for the second half of the season in particular was magnificent. Sonny Bradley at the back, so good. Various different goal scorers at different moments in the season. It felt like James Collins' injury was going to derail what had been a promising start, but it just kind of kicked on without him. Just an amazing, very clear playing style that they never really wavered from. A team solid at the back. I was on talking about Lincoln on... What was I doing it on the other day?
This guy gets so many media invitations, he
What was
can't
it
even
on?
remember. The radio.
No, it was on
TV.
it was on Square Ball.
The
Our
podcast.
friends at the Square Ball. And I was saying how Lincoln had managed to find this way of being like quite a defensive-minded, direct team who just score loads of goals. And I couldn't really work out how that was the case, but it is what they are. Like, they're a defensive unit first, who have an incredibly effective way of attacking and scoring goals. Just an amazing team, an amazing season, amazing story, and I'm really excited to see them bloody the noses of some of those teams in the Championship next season, because let me tell you right now, they will.
She's a perfect 10.
Can't have a 12 in this game, mate.
This episode is brought to you by SumUp.
Ali, as business owners, we've used SumUp before, haven't we?
Big time. Yeah, when we sold merch at the live show in Sheffield last summer, we used SumUp's brilliant payment solutions product to take payments for sales of our t-shirts, caps, mugs, but we've also both been sole traders for many years now, so making sure that we are ready and covered when it comes to tax is crucial.
Making tax digital for income tax is now live in the UK, and it's important that sole traders are MTD ready. Since the 6th of April 2026, sole traders earning over a certain amount must keep digital records and submit quarterly updates to HMRC using approved software.
And SumUp has built a free, simple software solution to help sole traders get MTD ready right inside its platform. It's free, there is no monthly fee, and getting started is easy. Just search SumUp MTD online to find out more. That's SumUp MTD. Right, from a happy imp to a floppy hatter. Luton Town, a 4 out of 10 season for them. They finished outside the playoff places, and I'm afraid with Luton, while it's difficult to really get your head around them winning promotion from League One to the Premier League and then dropping back down again in back-to-back seasons, it's hard to work out exactly where they should be, what their expectations should be. One thing is undeniable, and that is that their wage budget at League One level, because of where they'd been previously, was very, very high. They had a lot of good football players in the building. The problem is they just couldn't get them all fit, motivated, and set up in a coherent unit for too long, really. Jack Wilshere seemed to just about manage it by the end of the season. They won the EFL trophy, but finishing outside the playoff places and really never quite giving it enough of a go meant that for the majority of this long season, Luton were well under par, and therefore an under par rating of 4 out of 10, I think, is appropriate.
Mansfield Town next for me, who I have given a 6 out of 10.
Whoa.
Just above average. And I kind of ummed and ahed on this a lot.
Feels harsh.
Oh.
Good
I was
finishing
thinking
position.
maybe... Yeah, but you cannot Ali.
No, you can.
You cannot
can.
get blinded by finishing position.
You can.
It's the journey. It's how you get there. It's the process, not just the outcome.
Okay.
And even though Mansfield,
You said in the Championships episode, this is the one bit of content where the league table doesn't lie.
Talk about underlying numbers there. They finished 10th, which is, of
Great
course,
achievement.
A lofty position. And I'm not going to take that away from them. What?
Great achievement.
Yeah, I guess so. And it's, it's 6 above average. But I obviously have a higher opinion of what Mansfield Town are capable of. I've got a higher opinion of what they should be aiming for. I believe in this club. I believe in what they can do. I believe that there is a near future that if they get things right, they could be a championship club next season. And I'm sad that you don't. For much of the second half of the season, Mansfield looked like they were drifting towards a difficult end of the campaign that could even entail a relegation battle. And that for me is why, even though, obviously big credit for them getting out of that, and their amazing form at the end of the season deserves immense credit. But I'm not going to get carried away, and I'm not going to, when you consider that I had Doncaster as a 7 who finished 5 points beneath them, I'm pretty comfortable to say that an established League One side now, after their promotion a couple of seasons ago, and an ambitious one too, is a 6 where they finished. Maybe it's a 6.5, but I'm happy with a 6.
Northampton Town is a 2 out of 10 that I keep thinking could possibly be a 1 out of 10. They won in their first 10 games. They won 4 games to 0. They beat Orient away. They beat Blackpool at home, Bolton at home, Exeter at home. Am I saying that's enough to give them 2 out of 10? I guess so, because after that it was incredibly poor from October onwards. That is 9 months of the season, practically, or 8 months of the season. The way that it unravelled after Christmas is just horrendous, really. They only won 1 game. They drew 5, and they must have lost, 20-odd, including not winning after the 7th of February, losing every single game in March and in April. 10 games, I think that is, in total. The way that they capitulated, it does just reflect badly on those involved, because football, professional football is a professional sport where being competitive is essentially the minimum that you ask for. And I should mention here that Northampton don't have a big budget for this level. They've been left behind by a lot of clubs at this level budget-wise, and I can't criticise them for that. And they certainly didn't overperform their budget. But it really was a honking second half of the season. It's a 2 out of 10 that could be a 1 out of 10.
Okay, Peterborough United now for me. I'm giving a 4 out of 10. It could have been so much worse. This is a club who we are used to seeing challenging at the top end of League One. There are mitigating circumstances here, of course. It does feel like they haven't got the financial heft that they once had in terms of being able to spend big in order to replace the players that move on. Also, contracts being wound down meant that they maybe weren't able to monetize on assets as they previously were. But Peterborough United should not be finishing 4 points clear of the bottom 4. They, the end of the Darren Ferguson era, came here at a time where they looked like, when they were in the relegation zone, looked like they might get relegated out of the league. Luke Williams came in and immediately did a very good job to steady the ship, but they finished the season really poorly again. And there was a moment a couple of weeks out from the end of the season where it looked like they could even get sucked into it if Exeter and they knew it could find some form, but thankfully for Posh they couldn't. So a really bad season, one to forget. But I'm giving a 4 rather than a 3, because this isn't, in my mind, the Peterborough of old, and this wasn't, one of the better teams in the league having a really bad season. But they, there are some good young players there now, so hopefully they can build on what Williams is trying to do.
I think in my objective brain, Plymouth Argyle being a 5 out of 10 is the most cut and dried rating of the whole EFL, because on New Year's Day, after half of the season, they were in the relegation zone. That is to say, they were threatened with a second straight relegation, which would have been incredibly difficult to wrap your head around and was causing a huge amount of angst. And from that moment, in the second half of the season, the only team that was better than them were the historically good Lincoln City. They were the second best team behind Lincoln in terms of their points return, well over 2 PPG. They cracked it. They found a way to play. They found a way to get players building relationships, performing as individuals and as a unit, and it was very impressive. And so it was basically a 1 out of 10 for half of it and a 10 out of 10 for the second half of it. So we'll call it a 5 out of 10 overall. Missing out on the playoffs when you've just come down from the championships, maybe average, maybe a 5 out of 10 is actually generous. Maybe on that it should be a 4 out of 10. But I quite enjoyed these tricky greens the last few months, so I don't want to be too negative.
Port Vale, I've given a 3, which it's a disastrous season off the back of their promotion. True to what I was saying in the Championship, I could talk about their good underlying numbers in the first few weeks of the season or a few months of the season, but it didn't really matter because they were rooted to the bottom of League One, and it felt like this could be a 1 out of 10 season. But the decision to sack Darren Moore probably should have been made a bit earlier, especially that was said at the time. But you look at what John Brady did coming in, and the way that he managed to improve this team, and the way that he managed to get better results. They're amazing. I know it doesn't come into this rating, but they're the cup exploits as well. So I'm giving them a couple of marks just for a really good end to the season. Even though the survival was never really on at that point, it does feel like at least they've ended the season in a really positive place, and we'll be looking ahead to next season under their new manager, who's done such a good job. So a relegation is never good. You look at the way that Bradford, the way that Donny were able to compete, having been promoted. This was not that.
I've got Reading, who finished 12th, a 4 out of 10.
Wow, exciting.
They got, I think a lot of Reading fans would say that's too high. They got 12 points less than the season before. Now, with them, there's so much more going into it than just points and league position. For some people, it will be confusing that when they had a season of great distress, where takeover uncertainty was ongoing and budgets were affected, they finished just outside the playoffs. And then once the takeover was completed and work could be done to start repairing the mess left behind by Dai Yong, they then get 12 points fewer and they finish far lower in the table. It's hard to kind of work out exactly where to come down on that. I definitely want to recognise that rebuilding a club that's been left in that sort of mess isn't easy, and I believe there's lots of kind of underlying forces, if you like, or wreckage left behind that can impact things and make it harder than it might look, and not a straight easy upwards trajectory. But George, they did get considerably worse. They have still got some very good players. They didn't do well in the first part of the season under Noel Hunt. They sacked him for a period under Liam Richardson. Results picked up massively. It was not reflected in either the underlying performance numbers or the fans' vision of what the team was actually doing on the pitch. And then they tumbled well away from the playoffs, having just got into contention. So I'm going to call it 4 out of 10 season for Reading, but I'm definitely keen to hear from some Royals fans in the comments.
Rotherham United, 2 out of 10. Relegation. A club that are a once proud club who would regularly be one of the best teams in the league, in League One, under Paul Warne, now falling out of it the other way and powerless to do anything about it. Just a real mess, really, from start to finish. Again, I go back to the idea that if you were to tell Rotherham fans that they would end the season with Lee Clark in charge, that would have kind of told its own story. The decision to stick with Matt Hamshaw and be loyal to him through much of the season when things weren't going well. There was just that month where he won League One Manager of the Month after a good month when he was under pressure. The underlying numbers were bad. It suggested it wasn't going to last, but it seemed to buy him too much the time that cost them making the change that could have saved them. Just a terrible, terrible season all round, and hard to find any positives, really. 2 out of 10.
George, I need you to tell me whether Stevenage is a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, because they finished 6th in League One. It's their highest ever league finish. And I might put it to you that, far be it to crush any hopes and dreams of Stevenage fans, I think it's practically as high as they could feasibly get in the English football pyramid. That reflects the level of overachievement that I think that they've secured this season. How amazing I think the job Alex Ravella's done, what he's got out of this group of individuals, and the kind of overall squad strength on paper, the club's personality and kind of determination to get through sticky spells and find another good level. They only lost 2 games at home all season, which is pretty amazing. Their away record was quite poor, and that's probably probably takes them down to a 9 for me. And the fact that, obviously, having made the playoffs, they didn't score in either of the playoff semi-finals, which would have been disappointing, albeit not hugely surprising. So, I mean, what do you think? Is Stevenage a 9 or is it a 10?
It's a 9 for me. I basically just think that it's really hard to give a 10 when you haven't gone up.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that every promotion is a 10. But, yeah.
Cardiff was a 9. Who's next for you?
Stockport County.
Oh, interesting.
8 out of 10. It's, they finished third in the league. I know that you and I have both agreed that they weren't necessarily quite as good as we hoped that they would be. And it's felt like at times, for the first time ever, maybe that Stockport have got results when they haven't been that good, having previously maybe been a team that have looked formidable, posted some amazing numbers, and maybe not got what they deserved. But this time around, points on the board wasn't an issue at all for them. Good over 2 legs in their playoff semi-finals to get to the final. Good in the first half of the playoff final, and then just dismantled in the second half by a Bolton team who were rampant. But we can't be too harsh and judge them too harshly. Yes, they've got have a good budget for the level, but that doesn't mean that we should expect them to do any better than they've done. A really good season, another strong season that ends in disappointment for me, and I'm not going to be able to put them any lower than an 8.
Wigan Athletic, they got the same points as they did last year. One place finished below where they finished last year. It doesn't tell the whole story. They were battling relegation seemingly halfway through the season. That was a massive underperformance in the first portion of the campaign, and they got the managerial change right, and they improved under Gary Caldwell, and they finished the season with some positive energy. We've seen that previously at Wigan and in lots of other clubs, and I'm certainly holding my counsel as to whether that means they'll be challenging at the top of the table next season, which is kind of some of the murmurs that came out after 1 or 2 games this season under Ryan Lowe. To me, it still doesn't feel like the club is making much progress. I think it's, they are in a new reality, shall we say, like the glory years, the Premier League years, the Championship years, where they were able to compete financially for various reasons, both in terms of the league's, football-wide financial reasons, where it was easier to compete, and then the ownership situation where they previously had a very benevolent owner, and now they have one that, has to be slightly more sensible and slightly more, or try and get towards sustainability, which they haven't had for a long time. So I think it's a 4 out of 10 season because of the way it ended, just about getting it to just about under par, but not great, I don't think, at Wigan.
Yeah, Wycombe Wanderers now, who I've given a 5. Not a very good campaign, not a terrible one. They finished 11th. At times, they kind of threatened to be a team that looked like they could be better than this. And I think under Mike Duff in the second half of the season, they certainly improved. But, there's been a fair bit of investment in the playing squad over the last 18 months or so. And it still isn't really yielding the results you would expect. So it might be a generous 5, but basically I think they're just quite a good team that weren't quite as good as some of those above them. But it's a decent foundation for Duff to build on. And I anticipate they'll be stronger next season than they were this time around.
There you go then. Which grades do you strongly agree with and which do you somewhat disagree with? Let us know in the comments. It'd be great to hear from you. Please make sure that you follow and subscribe to the England pod. That is now that George and I are post-EFL season, feeling pretty loosey-goosey on the EFL front, but very serious on the England front. We'll be doing daily shows throughout the group stages and pretty much every other during the knockout stages. So please do follow the England pod and join us on the journey. Thank you for listening throughout the 25-26 League One season, and go well.